Hey there, I'm Benjamin from Loves Data. In this video, you're going to learn all about events in Google Analytics 4 or GA4. We will cover what events are and how events in GA4 compare to events in the previous version of Google Analytics. We will also explore the events that are automatically tracked into your reports, along with Google's recommended events and custom events. Okay, let's get started. With the introduction of Google Analytics 4, the team at Google also introduced a new data model. The new data model gives you more control and flexibility over the information you collect about your audience, their actions, and your website. More options and greater flexibility also mean events can be confusing. And if you've been using Google Analytics for a while, then you're probably already familiar with event tracking, which has been available since 2007. So we'll start by talking about the events we could track in the previous version of Google Analytics, called Universal Analytics, and compare them to the new events in Google Analytics 4. If you'd like to skip ahead to a particular topic, then you can find links to each of the topics we're going to cover in the description below this video. First up, what are events in Universal Analytics? In Universal Analytics, events were designed to track actions within your website's pages or in your app. For example, if you wanted to track the number of times people downloaded a file from your website, you would implement event tracking and use the event reports to see the number of downloads. The two main issues with the previous version of event tracking were the limits on the amount of information you could collect and the constraints around reporting. When you implemented event tracking for Universal Analytics, you could name the category of the event, name the action, include an optional label to capture additional information, and assign an optional value, like a dollar value. Here we can see an example of a Universal Analytics event used to track a video embedded on a website. We can see the event category as video, the event action is play, the event label is the URL of the embedded video, and the event value is the amount of time someone has watched the video. If you wanted to capture additional information, you'd need to either replace one of the existing values or squeeze the extra information in. For example, if you wanted to use event tracking to report clicks on different promotional banners, you might define the event category as promotion, then the event action as click, and the event label as summer specials, like we can see in this example. But what if you had two banners for the promotion? You would then need to decide which of the event parameters you would rename. For example, you might have one event label for summer specials top and another event label for summer specials sidebar. This is okay, but it isn't flexible, especially when it comes to reporting. If you want to report on the performance of the promotion, you'd need to include both labels, otherwise you'd be missing data. Once you implemented event tracking on your website, all of the events would be included in the event reports. Let's take a look. In Universal Analytics, we can find the events report under Behavior, and then Events. When we select Top Events, all of the events that have been tracked are in these reports. So in Universal Analytics, events were designed for tracking actions within a page. However, in Google Analytics 4, events are used to send all types of data to your reports. This includes actions, details about your users, and other information about your website. If we compare this to Universal Analytics, data was always sent as a hit, and there were predefined types of hits you could send, which meant you were out of luck if you wanted to collect custom information that didn't match one of the predefined hit types. The hit types in Universal Analytics were page views, events, e-commerce, social interactions, exceptions, user timings, and screens. Hits are replaced by events in Google Analytics 4, which means you can collect data for anything you like. You're no longer restricted to these predefined options. This brings us to our next topic. What can you track with events in Google Analytics 4? Well, in Google Analytics 4, you can use events to track any action or piece of information you like, from the pages people view, which are automatically tracked, to button clicks or even information you've collected in another platform, like your email marketing platform or CRM. You can send the data to Google Analytics using events. We will cover different ways you can use events in a moment, but here are some examples of what you can track with events. Pages people load on your website, actions people perform within a page, elements people have clicked, information from the URL of the page, transaction and product details, elements that are visible in the browser, and details you've collected about a user. There are plenty of ways to use events, and it comes down to your business, your audience, your objectives, and the type of reporting and analysis you want to perform. Okay, so events let us track all types of things into Google Analytics 4. The next important concept we need to cover are parameters. Parameters send extra information with events. For example, the page view event is sent to your reports with the page location and the page referrer parameters. The page location parameter lets you see the URL of the page that someone viewed, and the page referrer parameter lets you see the URL of the previous page they viewed. Let's head to Google Analytics 4 to take a look. We're looking at the debug view, which lets us see incoming events while we're testing our implementation, and we can see some events have come through. Let's select one of the events, and we can now see all of the parameters that have been sent with the event. Selecting a parameter then lets us see the value or information assigned to it. Google Analytics will automatically send parameters with each event. These can include the GA session ID parameter, which includes the unique identifier assigned by Google Analytics for the user's session, the page location parameter, which sends the URL of the page currently being viewed, the page title parameter, which sends the title of the page currently being viewed, and the page referrer parameter, which sends the URL that someone viewed before the current page. This can include other pages on your website or third-party websites if someone clicks through to your website from another website. Additional parameters can also be sent for events that are automatically tracked by Google Analytics. This brings us to automatic events. When you add the Google Analytics 4 tag to your website, it will automatically track a number of events when someone views a page. For example, Google Analytics will automatically track an event when someone spends at least 10 seconds on your website. Events that are automatically tracked include the first visit event, which is collected the first time someone visits your website. This event is also used to calculate the new users metric in your reports. The page view event, which is used to report on the page the user is viewing. The session start event, which is used to determine when the user's session started. A new session start event is triggered when there is a period of inactivity of 30 minutes. The user engagement event, which can be collected periodically and is used to report when someone has spent at least 10 seconds on your website. These automatic events can't be switched off or disabled. They are the critical components needed for Google Analytics, so you'll find them in all Google Analytics 4 properties. Next, we have enhanced measurement. Apart from the automatic events we just covered, you also have the option of using the enhanced measurement feature to collect additional data automatically. Enhanced measurement is configured for each data stream in Google Analytics 4. The best way to think about enhanced measurement is that it lets you track optional automatic events, while the automatic events we covered previously are mandatory. So with enhanced measurement, you can choose to turn particular automatic events on or off, depending on what you would like to see in your reports. Enhanced measurement lets you automatically track one or more of the following actions: scrolls for people scrolling at least 90% of a page, outbound clicks from your website to other websites, site search for the keywords entered into your website search function, video engagement of people watching embedded YouTube videos, and file downloads for people downloading files from your website. Okay, let's head back to Google Analytics to take a look. We're in the admin area of Google Analytics. Let's select Data Streams. And let's open the data stream. We can see details for the data stream at the top, and then below this we can see that enhanced measurement is enabled. Let's select the configuration icon. We can then turn any of the enhanced measurement events on or off in the interface. They'll be set to on by default, but if there are any events that you don't want to track, you can disable them. Enhanced measurement also provides advanced settings for the automatically collected page view events and site search events. For page views, you can disable the page changes based on browser history events option. By default, this option will automatically track page views when the URL of the page changes without the page reloading, or if content is loaded into the existing page without the page reloading. For example, if JavaScript is used to include additional content on a page, it's looking for history events in the browser. The other option you can adjust in enhanced measurement is the configuration for the site search event. Apart from the default query parameters, you can also adjust the query parameters Google Analytics uses to identify the keywords people are using to search within your website. And you also have the option of adding additional query parameters to collect further insights. For example, if your search function lets people refine their search by choosing a search category, you can add this to the additional query parameters. If you're just getting started, I recommend watching my Getting Started with Google Analytics 4 video covering enhanced measurement. I've included a link in the description below this video. Okay, we've covered events that are automatically tracked into your reports. But what if you want to track something else, something a little more custom? It's time to look at recommended events. Recommended events are a list of events and parameters that are provided by Google. They're designed to give you a starting point for anything custom you want to track into Google Analytics 4. They're grouped by industry, but you can use any recommended events that fit your needs. Google provides a list of recommended events for all websites and apps, retail and e-commerce, jobs, education, local deals and real estate, travel, and games. Let's head to the Analytics Help articles to take a look. We can see the recommended event names on the left, the recommended parameters on the right, and when to trigger the event in the center. Let's look at the recommendations for retail and e-commerce websites and apps. We can see Generate Lead included in the list of recommended events. However, you don't need to be running an e-commerce website for this event to be useful. Any website aiming to capture leads should be using this event to report on the number of people entering their contact details. The main thing to remember is that you can use any of these recommended events on your website if they're appropriate. My top picks from the list of recommended events include the Select Content event for tracking actions within a page, the Select Promotion event for tracking the number of times a special offer was clicked, the View Promotion event to understand the number of impressions of a special offer, the Generate Lead event to track the number of leads you've captured, the View Item event to understand when people view particular products, the Add to Cart event to track people adding items to their shopping cart, and the Purchase event for successful e-commerce transactions. If you'd like to learn more about implementing recommended events on your website, then watch my tutorial on click button and form tracking. In the video, I show you how to track these elements, and you'll see recommended events and parameters being configured in Google Tag Manager. I've included a link in the description below this video. If you've reviewed the events that are automatically tracked, including the enhanced measurement options, and you've checked the list of recommended events, then the final option is to create custom events. This is where you decide how to name your events. You should aim for a consistent naming convention, and ideally it should follow Google's recommended event names. This will help keep things clear and logical in your reports. For example, you might let people rate products on your website. You could then create a new event named Product-Rating that collects people's rating selections. Although you can name your events anything you like, it's probably better to follow Google's naming convention. If we look at the recommended events, we'll see the naming convention for products include view_item, and select_item. So we see the action or behavior is used first, followed by an underscore, then item. This doesn't quite align with our custom event of product-rating. Instead, we should probably consider a custom event with the name of rate_item to follow a similar naming convention to other events that are already available in our reports. You can then follow a similar approach for any parameters you send with your custom event. For example, we would use recommended parameters like items and item_ID and a custom parameter rating or similar for the actual rating people selected. This means we'd end up sending the following parameters to Google Analytics for someone who rated a product 5 out of 5. And if you want to see the event parameters in your reports, you will also need to register them as custom dimensions or metrics. We'll cover registering parameters in a moment. Now that we've covered the different types of events, including enhanced measurement, recommended events, and custom events, it's time to look at how we can send events to Google Analytics. The first option is creating a new event based on an existing event. For example, if you want to create an event for people viewing a specific thank you page on your website, you can create a new event using the existing page view event. Let's head to Google Analytics to see how we can do this. We begin by selecting Events, and then Create Event. We can then name our new event. I'm going to name this event Generate_lead. We can then enter the conditions for our new event. This tells Google Analytics when to trigger our new event. For this event, I'm going to select page location as the parameter, then contains, and then I'm going to enter thank-u as the value. This will mean our new event will be tracked whenever someone views a page on our website that has a URL containing thank-u. When you're happy, you can create your new event. And apart from creating new events in the interface, you can also modify existing incoming events too. For example, if you want to change the value of a parameter to clean up your reports. If you'd like to learn more about modifying events, then I've included a link for you in the extra resources below this video. If you're not able to base your new event on one already being sent to Google Analytics, you can create new events in Google Tag Manager. This lets you send new events for just about any action taking place on your website. Let's head to Google Tag Manager to take a look. Okay, let's say we want to track people selecting a promotional offer on our website. To do this, we're going to create a new event tag. Let's create a new tag. And let's name the tag Google Analytics GA4 Promotion. And let's select GA4 Event as the tag type. Then we need to select our existing GA4 configuration tag. And we can name our event. Let's name this event select_promotion. And let's select event parameters. And add a row. Let's name the parameter promotion_ID. And let's click the variable icon. And choose Click Classes. This will automatically send the CSS class for our promotional element as the value of the parameter. Now let's add another row and enter location_ID as the name. And let's click the variable icon again and choose Click URL. This will send the URL of our promotional element for the parameter. Now we just need to add a trigger to fire our tag when the promotion is clicked. We can then save the tag and publish the changes when you're ready. If you'd like to learn more about creating these types of tags, I recommend watching my Google Tag Manager tutorial series on YouTube and checking out my Google Tag Manager course. I've included links in the description below this video. Now that we've covered how to send events to Google Analytics 4, we need to touch on reporting. The most important thing to point out is that if you want to see the values of your parameters you've sent with your events, you'll need to register them in Google Analytics. If you don't register the parameter, you won't see them in your reports. Let's head back to Google Analytics to take a look. To register a parameter, we navigate to Custom Definitions. Then we need to choose either Custom Dimensions or Custom Metrics. Custom dimensions are generally used to report text-based information, for example, the name of a country or the URL of a link someone has clicked. In comparison, custom metrics are used to report a numerical value, like a count or a percentage. For example, if you're sending a dollar value as a parameter, you would register this as a metric. Let's create a custom dimension so we can report on the different outbound links people are clicking on our website. Let's create a new custom dimension. Let's name the dimension Link URL. We will leave the scope for the dimension set to Event. We can enter a short description. And then we need to select the name of the parameter we want to register. Any parameters that have already been sent to your reports will be available in the drop-down. If you haven't sent the parameter yet, then you can also enter it exactly as it will be sent. Let's select Link URL. And we can then create our custom dimension. After your parameter is registered, you will find it in your Google Analytics 4 reports moving forward. This doesn't include historical data. Let's find our link URL parameter in the reports. To do this, let's select Events. And then select Click. At the bottom of the standard report, we can now see details for the parameter we registered. And if you don't see the details straight away, this is because it can take some time for it to appear in your report. Apart from finding the parameters in the standard reports, you'll also be able to use them when creating custom reports under Analysis and then Analysis Hub. Before you start configuring new events in Google Analytics 4, I recommend you take the time to review your current implementation and decide what events you need to track. Begin by checking the events that are automatically sent by default, then review Enhanced Measurement. You can then look at the recommended events and custom events depending on what you want to send to Google Analytics. What events are you going to send to GA4? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please like it so I know to make more videos like this. See you next time.